recording. Okay, so what we want to do is build up our threading here. And for some of the stuff, we're doing a couple different things. We're building a 3D model for rendering, for a concept. But even then, we would still be making this, if we were doing this for production or something, we would still be modeling these things in, even though we're going to probably buy it or not make it. And the reason for that is you want everything in your CAD model that is going to be there to be called out so that people are aware of how it fits and goes in together properly. We'll talk about bill of materials and all that later on. So what we're going to do here is we've got to make these posts, which we did already, and then we're just going to do a simple circle and a swept from one point to the next point. So if I look at these, they don't seem tall enough. So what we're going to do is we're just going to come back and raise that up. And again, we can just go to our feature, edit it. And for some of this stuff, we're just kind of eyeballing. And for some reason, oh, there we go. I don't know why it's running so slow here. So we're just going to go up that much more. Now, what we need to do is there's a couple things. We need to draw a circle, and then we need to draw the path. So we can take a couple different approaches, but the very first thing we need to do is we need to have a sketch plane in this space. So what I like to do is, again, we're going to come over here, create a reference geometry, and we're going to go and say insert reference geometry plane, and I've already selected that right plane so it knows that it's going to build one off of that. We are then going to come over here and say we want it to be at this point here. We're going to select a vector, so that's going to be our reference. So what this does is now it gives me where I'm going to build my path. So we're going to come onto there, create the sketch. Whoops. And we have a couple different things that we can do. We could use a spline, which gives us a little bit more freedom, or we can kind of do a straight line, a bend here, and put radiuses on it. You know, we'll get into later with the rendering how to make things look a bit more realistic. But for this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly show a spline. And what I'm going to do is, for that spline, I'm just going to put a point here. And I'm going to draw a straight line here. And what I can do with the spline is I can control the shape. Of what that looks like. And I can get a little bit more unique form. Now, one of the things is we want it to come straight in because it doesn't come in at an angle, you know. So what we want to do is, oops, pull this out a little. Come on, stop. Pull it out a little bit. And then what we'll do is we'll just have a straight line going in. And this is going to be the path that our cord takes. Now, you can see here that there's a kink. I'm going to use a feature that's called tangency. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this curve and this straight line, and I'm going to say I want to make it tangent, which means that there is no angle there. Some of this will dive into much deeper detail. Now, what I can do is I can adjust the size and diameter. So I now have the path that I want my swept surface to go on. So we'll hit yes. Now what I need to do is I need to create the circle that I'm going to sweep along there for the cord. So again, I now need a plane that comes across there for me to do. So let us come in. Where's my front plane? And we're going to go Insert, Reference Geometry, Plane. And what we're going to do is we're going to use that dot right there. So that's the end of the curve. So that's where we want it to start. So we're going to put it right like that. Now what I can do is I can come in, I'll sketch on there, and I don't always need to go to a flat view. It helps. If I have a dimension, we can put a dimension on there. So now, in order to do a swept command or a swept feature, we need the path and the profile. So we'll come over here, we'll go to our features, a swept boss. It wants the sketch profile, which will be that. And then it wants the path, which will be this here. Now, same thing as any other feature. What I did was I created it and it automatically unioned everything. So I need to go in and make sure that I'm saying, hey, do not join the parts all together, because these are still going to be two separate items. Nope. What's going on there? I'm not, oh, there we go. So for some reason, so we've always seen on the extrude boss command that merge features is always showing. So for here, we've got to go under our options and turn off merge results. So now we have that separate object. Now, we can look at this and say, well, it's too high up. It needs to be lower. In order for it to be lower, we have to do one of three things. We have to move the path, so the path is lower. we have to move the circle that we're saying, hey, extrude it so that it's lower, or we have to move both of them. Normally, it's good to have everything moved together so that the circle is connected to the path. And the reason for that is that way you just know where things are and you don't have just sketches that are floating around. So what we need to do is we did two things. We created the sketch, the path first, and then we created the sketch. And we said for the circle that the circle is connected to that center of that sketch. So again, if we want this to be slightly different, what we can do is come back and edit that plane. So that plane there that we created is tied to that point. So if we come back and we go edit feature, we can see that that plane is there and the circle comes across at that point. So we used a vertex, which was that point there. We could have used another vertex along here or a point, or we could use a distance. So if we come in and we get rid of that, what we can do is come in and do a distance and use another vertex. Now that one looks like it's probably too low. We want it slightly higher. And SolidWorks just crashed on me. So I will pause. So we're just going to ignore the errors. Okay. Why it crashed? We don't know. It's hard to say. So let's just go back to what we were doing, which was adjusting the plane that we sketched on. So we're going to come back. It's our right plane. We're going to go edit feature. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go with a distance. We're going to flip the side to offset. I could have done a measurement first. So that looks pretty good. So we're just going to say there. So now, because that circle was attached to where that curve was drawn, everything updated automatically. Now, the only thing we don't have in here is a cutout. And you can kind of see it just kind of looks like it just magically goes into it. So what we would want to do is create a cutout. Now, here's the nice thing that we can do. We can come in and utilize the same items over again. So for this, if I want to do a cut, I can come in and say, okay, even though this sketch and this sweep is combined with here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn them on so we can see them. Because the moment you use a sketch, it automatically gets hidden. And what we're going to do is we're going to go swept cut. And again, we're going to use the circle. And we're going to use this as the path. And we're going to come in and we're going to say the selected bodies is this and this. So I'm not letting it determine what it is. I'm telling it what to cut. What I want to do now is I just want to hide that hose, and I'm going to fake in a fillet just so that it doesn't look like it's edge on edge. And I'll show you what I'm doing here and why. So if I come, and let me, you know what, let me just do this. Damn fly. Okay, we're going to bring it into KeyShot. Bear with me, it's just opening up on one of my other monitors. And I'm going to apply a material here just quickly. Okay, so it's too small to show up. But what my goal of having that in there is so that this ends up looking like a separate component. And then it just doesn't magically go into that edge. So if we come over here, you can see that slight shadow. If we were doing a detail shot, it's just not a simple drawing a line. You would get a slight shadow. Let me just come back here and I'll make that just slightly bigger so it's a little more pronounced. Normally, if I was going for really, really realism, I would have made that circle slightly bigger so that there's what's called clearance. I do not know why this machine is running so slow today. Probably because I was doing too much work and not rebooting. So again, this is the plug-in feature where I can make a change on here and I can just hit update. I don't have to bring the model back in. And then you can see here what it's doing is figuring out what that update was. So now it looks like a tube that's going into a hole versus just a tube that is hitting that edge. So that's why when we do some of these renderings and they're presentation renderings, we want to add a little bit of that realism. We want to kind of fake that stuff in, even though it's only meant for conceptualization. Are you guys able to see what I'm showing you? Is that coming across? Okay. Now, the one nice thing about using that spline is that it gives it a little bit more of an organic feel to it and look. It's not just a perfect ellipse. It's not just a perfect something. And I'm going to show you what I mean by that when we come in here and we look at this object and we see how that's not perfect. You know, it's not a bent piece of plastic that is solid. It's organic in shape and form. And we want to try to achieve some of that. Now, what we're doing is it's going to be a static rendering. So I'll show you how we do that. But at that point, you know, down the road, hey, how do we get a little bit more of this twist and bend in it? So if we're doing a 3D model and we just want to show the presentation, like there's the 10-minute, drop the handle on there, you know, do the rendering, get approved. And then there's the, hey, let's make this look photorealistic. And that's the, you know, 2-hour handle. You have to understand, where do you spend your time? Where do you spend that effort? So, and you can kind of see what we did, or what I did, even then doesn't quite look like this. It kind of goes a little bit sharp. So we can always come back and say, well, I want to tweak that a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit that spline so I can see it, which means I can click on it. Come on. I got a feeling this video is going to be more about waiting for my machine to catch up. This is one of those things too, where if you're doing 3D